afternoon and welcome to HireRight's webinar, Point of Collection Testing Considerations. We are glad that you could join us today. I am Ashley Kirchmar, account analyst for a drug and health screening business here at HireRight, and I will be your host for this event. HireRight prepared this presentation for informational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for legal advice. Should you have any legal questions, please direct them to your legal counsel. Before we begin, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. We will not be providing copies of the slides today. However, we will be sending out an email tomorrow with your HRCI insurance credit and a link to the recorded session that you can listen to at your own convenience or share with your colleagues. If you're experiencing any audio or visual issues, please refresh the browser window by pressing F5 on your keyboard, or let us know through the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. After the presentation, we would appreciate getting your feedback. Please take a short survey. Let us know if this session was valuable and if you have any ideas for future topics. HireRight's speaker for today is Dr. Todd Simo, HireRight's Chief Medical Officer and Managing Director of Transportation. You can review his bio in the speaker folder. Dr. Simo, I'd like to turn it over to you now.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ashley. And again, a special thanks to everybody who attended and anybody who couldn't attend today but are listening to this presentation in the future. Thanks for taking the time to spend with me. So from this perspective, I am going to talk about point of collection testing solutions. So POCT is the, so to speak, abbreviation or acronym for that. Coming out of the pandemic, there's been a, labor shortage. There's companies that, are trying to onboard people faster and faster. Candidates, candidates have the choice of employers. And in fact, I was at one of our larger employers when they were talking about, the war for talent. And that gentleman said, well, the war for talent is over. The candidates have won. So, from that perspective, it's kind of a, so to speak, buyer's market. The candidate, gets to kind of select where he or she will go. And certainly getting them through the screening process the fastest with the least amount of, so to speak, hiccups from a candidate perspective certainly is useful, for the, hiring employer to be able to say yes and get them, in their job force and working faster. And a lot of times that first yes is the one that wins when an applicant may have multiple, so to speak, applications out there. So, the agenda here is pretty straightforward. The first thing I'm going to do is really review what point of collection testing is from a scientific perspective. Then I'm going to go through and kind of talk about the different specimens that are supported with, this point of collection testing or instant testing solution. There are two broad options of instant testing solutions. One is on-site, where you as the company act as the collector, or you bring collectors in that run these devices. But most of the time, the clients that are, using an on-site program are doing it themselves. And the next one is a clinic solution where instead of doing a laboratory-based urine drug screen, the initial test is pushed out to a laboratory center, and we'll talk more about that in upcoming slides. We are going to talk about an overview of a new instant testing solution that our product team has set up for our clients to use. And then lastly, I'm going to go over just some brief recommendations on starting or enhancing a point of collection testing solution. So let's now talk about the key considerations. So really, point of collection testing is nothing more than moving the initial immunoassay test. So the immunoassay is the very sensitive but not specific test. So the immunoassay test, detects the presence of drug based upon its interaction with an antibody. So everybody who ran a COVID test on themselves a few years back, ran an immunoassay test on themselves. And this test is fundamentally no different. These devices are set up to, so to speak, screen at a particular screening threshold level. but the devices themselves don't tell you, exactly what is there, nor does it, quantify it. All it does is say, hey, this is potentially, more, potentially has a given drug or analyte, and therefore, it's not a negative sample. So I'll go through the next slide here. So immunity tests, assay tests are highly sensitive, which means they generate no false negatives. So from when you get an immunoassay test through an FDA approved device, you're essentially screening quickly to say, is there, potentially drugs in this, sample? And if the test shows all the results are, everything is negative, you can walk away with, assurance that the person had no, drugs in his or her specimen at that period of time. However, if it's presumptively positive or, indeterminate, some people use, well, that given sample or that given donor needs to have further confirmation testing, because immunoassay tests aren't 100% specific. And specific is the test that essentially says, this is the drug, this is, and this is the amount of the drug, so to speak, when you go through the chromatographic mass spectrometry test. So again, this test is really useful to rapidly identify a negative sample, as well as rapidly identify a specimen or a donor that needs to, undergo further testing. Because again, everything you read on the internet about false positives are essentially due to the immunoassay being cross-reactive to another specimen or to another substance. So again, and there's the known, key issue with, point of collection tests or instant tests are the false positives. The immunoassay will bind to a specific site on a drug, and that binding to the drug then causes the test to so to speak, show a positive result. However, if another drug or another substance has a very similar chemical configuration, it will all of a sudden say, hey, that's potentially cocaine as well. And it will falsely identify that drug as cocaine. So again, many of the stimulants out there cause amphetamines to be immunoassay positive. So at least, once a week, we get a letter into the medical review office from a treating physician that says, my patient's on Ritalin. And I looked online and Ritalin causes, amphetamine or methamphetamine positive drug screen results. Well, that certainly shows that online. And that certainly is pertinent if the test is only an immunoassay test, because Ritalin is cross-reactive to, the amphetamine class of drugs on the point of collection test or the immunoassay test. However, none of the tests that we report to clients are based upon immunoassay technology. The technology that ultimately all of our lab partners use is a chromatography and mass spectrometry. That kind of tandem test is very sensitive and eliminates Ritalin as being a reason for an amphetamine or methamphetamine positive result. So we have a standard response, always going back to the treating physician going, this isn't an immunoassay test, this is a confirmation test with, GCMS, a gas chromatograph mass spectrometry testing, and therefore, all the Ritalin in the world will not cause this test result. So again, and you can see that, various other cannabinoids like CBD are cross-reactive with delta-9 THC. And there's actually an antidepressant class that actually shows up on point of collection tests as positive for PCP or angel dust. Well, these antidepressants certainly aren't angel dust. And when that specimen is sent in for further testing, it always fails to, so to speak, be confirmed, and ultimately there's a negative test result that follows. So again, from a testing perspective, that point of collection test rapidly identifies the negative test result, and then also indicates what specimens need to go through further testing. And here's the further testing. So again, the confirmation testing process is that chromatography and mass spectrometry, which is a elegant scientific procedure that identifies the exact drug within that class, and also quantitates it to say, yep, that's the metabolite of delta 9 THC, and the level is 37 nanograms per milliliter. And that then gets, reported to me as the MRO to then go through the, so to speak, the medical review process to see if the donor has a reasonable, verifiable, legal medical explanation for the result. So again, any point of collection test does need to have, confirmation testing done on the specimen if on site it shows that the donor is presumptively positive. So here's the first question here is, are any of you doing any sort of point of collection testing today, either yourself or, at a collection site? So the answers are A, yes, B, no, C, not sure. So I'll give, a few seconds here for, attendees to respond. At this point in time, I wish I had the Jeopardy music for like Final Jeopardy to be playing in the background. So at this point, it looks like a third of the participants, are doing some form of point of collection tests. Over half of you, aren't doing any. And then there's about 1 out of 10 that aren't sure what you're doing from a drug-free workplace perspective. So thank you for that information. So the basic process flow for any point of collection test is the point of collection test is collected. There's a result available in about 10 minutes. Many times it happens, the specimen, reacts with the immunoassay much faster and you get a result much quicker. But again, in 10 minutes, you'll, so to speak, have a result just as you had with your COVID test. If it is negative, we said before, due to that immunoassay test being, very, very sensitive, you can, rest assured that there was no drugs detected in that specimen. However, if it is positive, again, there are potential drugs. However, there are those possibility of false positives. Therefore, you need to have confirmation testing conducted. So what are the specimens supported by, point of collection testing? So before I go into the two specimens, urine and oral fluid that I'm showing today, there's a hair test point of collection solution. It's really not something that an employer can easily do. Essentially, there's equipment needed to, so to speak, prepare the specimen, and this is something that potentially a large clinic network could set up, or a drug court could set up. But if you go ahead and Google point of collection tests for hair, there are ones available, but they're really not readily available for employers to use for their drug-free workplace programs, nor is it feasible due to the amount of equipment and so to speak, preparation and difficulty, conducting those tests. So I just wanted to call that out for anybody who's, a hair advocate. Yes, there are emerging point of collection tests for hair. However, they're just not readily available for an employer to easily deploy in its sites. So the ones that are easy to deploy in the sites are number one, urine. So, there's many, test panels available. However, depending upon the manufacturer, so to speak, the device, there's certainly not as many tests that are supported by the lab. There's two basic configurations, and I kind of show them to the side. One's, so to speak, a dip card, where a person urinates in a collection cup and either the donor or the collector dips the card into that urine and waits for the lateral flow, waits for the urine to propagate up the strips to read the result. There's also kind of an inline cup where the test strips are embedded within a collection cup. So again, that's much easier to do. You don't have open urine on your desk. But again, the cup configuration is more expensive than the dipper. Again, the point of collection urine tests, one of the pros is the confirmation, so to speak, the screening cutoffs, excuse me, are the same as that the laboratory supports. So there isn't a substantial difference between a point of collection urine test and the immunoassay test done at the laboratory. So those are very, very equivalent, and from an FDA filing perspective, they've been proven to be equivalent. The cons of it, it is urine. I think most HR and safety personnel would prefer not to handle someone else's urine. And there is a need for a clean, private, single stall bathroom, or a bathroom that is, so to speak, secured, so it's only one person in there that's delivering the specimen. And then, depending upon the device, some devices like the cups can be sealed and sent to the laboratory for confirmation testing purposes. If you're using one of the dipper configurations, then you have to be able to pour off an aliquot of that sample before it is dipped, to have it ready to be sent to the laboratory. So again, you do have to handle urine, and for any presumptive positives on site, get that urine sent to the laboratory. From a oral fluid perspective, again, there's a kind of a swab only, that you swab their mouth and that saliva propagates up the immunoassay, propagates up the strips and reacts with the immunoassay. There's also an inline cup where someone swabs their mouth, and then part of the process is so to speak, getting the oral fluid off of that swab, kind of pressing it into a cup device where the strips are within there, so the specimen can propagate up the test strips. Again, there are multiple panel configurations available. However, it's not as many as urine, and it's certainly not as many as the lab supports. One of the pros is it's very easy to collect, and you have no need for plumbing. So this can be collected in any kind of clean collection site, like the security office, the HR's professional's office. So again, you don't need any bathroom facilities or anything else. You just need a clean collection point. Again, one of the cons, and this is really addressed in the next slide, is the screening levels for THC supported by the devices currently available are higher than what the lab supports. And whenever the, so to speak, screening level is higher, the detection window is shorter. And I'll address that in the next slide. And then, depending upon the device used for oral fluid, some of those devices can be sealed and sent to the laboratory. Many of those devices can't. And, therefore, if you have a presumptive positive, you need some sort of further collection, such as, okay, this oral fluid test was positive for, cocaine metabolite. Now I'm going to start a chain of custody and do another collection event with a Quantasol, collection device. And therefore, I'm collecting another sample on that donor. So again, there is a device now available that can be sent to a laboratory, and the laboratory can actually run it out of the device where the oral fluid is captured. So again, when we look at oral fluid from a lab-based perspective to a point of collection perspective, starting with the right-hand side of the slide, for drugs like cocaine, amphetamine, methamphetamine, there's really no difference in the detection window between oral fluid, laboratory-based, and oral fluid point of collection testing. The substance that is different is delta-9 THC. And if we go back, 10 years, this was one of the things that, I would talk clients out of, using a point of collection device in oral fluid due to the fact that, you can't detect THC through as long a window. So, laboratory-based testing is really based upon a screening level of 4 nanograms per milliliter. Now, some of the labs test in a different way where they're using a more dilute oral fluid sample. So you'll see some screening levels being underneath that. But from a true perspective, all the labs are essentially set up to screen for, the evidence of delta-9, THC in its parent psychoactive form, at a level of 4 nanograms per milliliter. When you look at the initial filing data from Lab 1, the detection window at 4 nanograms per milliliter for sporadic users is around 16 hours. For chronic users, it's around 21 hours on average. There's been emerging data here that is based upon the very high concentration, high dose THC available in states that have decriminalized it, particularly for recreational use. And now we're seeing that detection window slide a bit longer. It's certainly not as long as urine, where the sporadic user is positive for 2 to 3 days, and the chronic user is positive for out to about 7 to maybe 10 days. But it does, increase that detection window into the 30 plus hour range. So again, it is longer than that 21 hours stated there, but it's certainly, well within, the known impairment window for delta-9 THC. So, when you look at point of collection tests though, the ones available today range in screening levels of 10 nanograms per milliliter to 40 nanograms per milliliter. Now, that sounds like a very broad range, but when you look at it from a scientific perspective, both of those, so to speak, screening levels give you a window of detection between 4 and 6 hours. So what you're detecting is recent use, and recent use when the person is presumptively high. So, from this time-space continuum, where there's a lot of concern of, well, I'm not so concerned about someone using over the weekend, but I'm really concerned if they use it over lunch. Well, point of collection oral fluid product essentially gives you a detection window that is very, consistent with someone who just used prior to coming into work or used over lunch, and therefore the person is presumptively high if they have a positive on-site THC test that is subsequently confirmed for delta-9 THC. Because as I said before, if someone uses a CBD product over lunch and it's pure CBD, that on-site test is going to say, yeah, that could be marijuana. But when it goes to the lab, it will fail to confirm from delta-9 THC. CBD and delta-9 THC have completely different confirmation testing profiles. So with that all being said, does the shorter detection window with instant or point of collection testing for THC matter to you? And the first answer is yes, I like the broader window of detection. Yes, I like the broader window of detection available in, oral fluid testing. So again, the first one is I want the big, longer detection window consistent with urine. I want the longer detection window consistent with laboratory-based oral fluid. Yes and no, it depends upon the reason for testing, so whether it's pre-employment or reasonable suspicion. The answer D is no, I don't test for THC. We don't care about it. And the last answer is E, no, the shorter detection window for point of collection oral fluid is attractive to us because it just shows recent use. So thank you for the ones already responding. And I wish I could sing, some sort of muse act to keep you amused, but I'll wait for, enough attendees to respond, and we'll look at the answers. Ashley, in the next one, when we do these questions, I'm going to have you, so to speak, tape some music for us to play. And we're up just over 40%, so let's see if the answers. And again, it's kind of what I expected. Many of you, some of you want the longer detection window in urine. Some are like the longer detection window in oral fluid. I figured that answer number C was going to be the one that would be most interest because, pre-employment in a state, like California, or Colorado that has decriminalized marijuana, you may not say, well, wow, the person's just applying, they're not on the job, maybe we don't test for THC, but for reasonable suspicion, we want to know if they recently used, because that will allow us to have the most compelling case at an employment commission. There are some respondents that just don't test for THC, which is fine. That's testing for THC is just part of a risk mitigation strategy. And again, testing for those other substances are important because all of those do cause workplace incidents to happen. And then there are I guess the second highest group are that shorter detection window is now a selling point for point of collection testing because we just want to know what they did going into work or during work. So I appreciate all your responses. So again, now there's the administrative options in regards to, do we do this, ourselves, or do we depend upon a clinic? So again, on-site point of collection testing is generally done by company employees. So those company employees act as collectors. Many times with our clients, it's, maybe a safety department. Some of our clients have medical staff like nurses there that can run these tests. There are HR professionals that run these tests. The real pros with having an on-site program, one of the major ones is it eliminates specimen collection costs. Another big one is, no lost time at a collection site. So you're not, in the pre-employment setting, you're not sending someone out with a 3-day window to go get a specimen collected. Essentially, you conduct the test right then and know within 10 minutes if they're negative, and if they're non-negative or presumptively positive, that you're sending that specimen in for further testing. So again, that immediate knowledge of negative results is important. Acknowledging also that if a test is presumptively positive, doesn't mean the donor will ultimately have a positive drug screen. Because again, from a cross-reactivity and false positive perspective, that is of consideration, as well as of consideration are donors that have a reasonable and verifiable medical explanation for a result for like codeine or morphine or amphetamine. But having that immediate knowledge of a non-negative result is of concern because now you may have a bias. Well, I really didn't like this person anyway. I really don't want to proceed with anything. Again, you should really let the process play out before making any derogatory decision in regards to employment. And then you have the administration handling the result. How do we get it into the confirmation testing process? What does that look like? Do we need to collect another specimen? Okay, I have a negative result. How is that negative result recorded in a platform of record for me to easily audit who had a test and who didn't? So the clinic point of collection tests actually handle some of those problems. So again, we're partnered, with eScreen and offer the eCup Plus product, which is a configurable multi-panel cup that if you're currently doing a laboratory-based urine program, but now you're saying, hey, we like using collection sites that keeps us out of being a collector. We have a urine program today. This is something that I encourage you to look at because what it gives you is an immediacy of that negative result. And I'll go through some turnaround times coming up, but it all of a sudden allows you to see that result, and that result flows through flows through a platform to report to you, like the HireRight Enterprise platform, just the same way as a laboratory result does, except you actually get those negative results, those immunoassay negative results, the same day it's collected. So you get it, very quick, in a very quick pattern, and you're not waiting a day to get that specimen. Now, if the specimen is on-site positive, with that E-cup, you're not getting that result right away. That result is handled by the collection site, bundled up, sent to the lab for confirmation testing. So the pros of this, it's a highly automated service, which is easy to order. If you're a HireRight client, you're doing it today, and you just need to see, what test panels can we, use this, E-cup Plus device to support. You have that immediate knowledge of a negative result. Now, is it as immediate as you running it yourself? No, but it is certainly more immediate than immunoassay negatives that are done at the lab, because you don't have to wait for the courier service to get the specimen to the lab. And again, the cons line there in regards to the administration handling the result, well, the clinic handles all that for you, and the clinic's very used to dealing with urine and can, so to speak, package it up and get it to the laboratory, get the seals on the specimen right, initiate the chain of custody appropriately. So they have all of those things more hardwired than you may have at your, business. The cons is not, every area of the United States is supported with, E-cup Plus device. And then there is the inherent, delay with the donor getting to the collection site. So, if you give the donor 3 days to get to the collection site, with that authorization form, you're giving the donor 3 days. So you're kind of delaying that negative result ultimately getting to you. So again, as long as you go into it eyes wide open, the E-cup Plus solution is a great solution for people to leverage that currently have a urine program that you're depending upon a clinic, a clinic network to collect. And within what we offer is, if you're set up with this, if the clinic offers the E-cup, E-cup Plus streaming, that result will be delivered to you, through that mechanism. If the clinic somehow isn't installed with that equipment, a traditional laboratory test is defaulted to, and it goes through that process. So again, it's highly automated and configurable at the clinic level with no special work done to your given streaming packages. So when you start looking at it, and this is March data in regards to negative drug screens. So the first one is the E-cup Plus. And when I look at our data, those negative urine tests, and these are all urine tests to compare things side to side, those are all available within about 2 hours. So the person, so you order it, within 2 hours of the person being at the collection site, that result flows through an integration and is available to us. The next is a traditional laboratory-based test. And if that laboratory-based test is negative, you're getting that result in about 31 hours. So again, there is a inherent day delay in getting you that result. And then when you're running it yourself and interacting, you're with that device without needing any kind of platform result, you're getting that result within 10 minutes. So that turnaround time you can see there is less than 0.2 hours. So here's a question. It's a question that also will be in the final questions, but who's interested in learning more about clinic-based point of collection testing? So with about a third of the people responding, it's really a 50-50 split. So again, anybody who indicated yes, when you go to the end of the program, if you can indicate yes there, someone from the HireRight team, if you're a HireRight client, can certainly reach out to you to give you more information on that. So, what's HireRight's new point of collection testing solution? So, before I show you the solution, which is a oral fluid test, I do want to address some challenges with point of collection testing once again. So part of point of collection testing that I hear is a challenge is companies don't like when their people have to read the device. So, a person's making a judgment on whether it's positive or negative. So that's a challenge, and some companies have avoided point of collection testing due to them not wanting their own personnel interpreting immunoassay testing results. Number two is really digitizing that result. So how do you get, this result that I'm able to see in front of me saying it's negative into a world where I can get it in as a platform report and all of a sudden easily have it available that if I want to audit my program to make sure John and Jane candidate both were tested, that I can, go in and audit it to make sure the drug screen was negative. And then the third challenge is not needing a secondary collection. So to all of a sudden collect a specimen and see that it's presumptively positive, then to all of a sudden go, oh my God, I got to do another oral fluid collection or another, send the person now to a collection site to get it done. What you want to do is really use one specimen for the complete test, both the screening test and then the confirmation test. So that's the challenge. And our new solution that our product team set up addresses all three of these points. So again, the new solution, uses, in regards to the company reading it, it uses a cell phone app to read the point of collection device. And also within that application creates a completely digital custody and control form, i.e. chain of custody. The result itself, once it is read by that app, is, so to speak, digitized and flows through an integration into the HireRight platform. So if John candidate has a negative drug screen, John candidate's negative drug screen immediately appears within an order within the HireRight enterprise platform. And, and if it does read that it is non-negative, that, digital chain of custody is then used to be the chain of custody of record for the confirmation test. That specimen can be sealed and then sent to the laboratory with a completely digital chain of custody. So no need for paper. All there is a need is for some seals to go over the given cup to come with collection supplies. And that really goes to point number three is, there's not a second collection. That collection that shows that, Joe Blow is presumptively positive for cocaine. Mr. Blow's specimen is sealed. That digital chain of custody is utilized, and that specimen is then sent to the laboratory for confirmation testing. And once that the laboratory confirmed result is completed, that result flows to the MRO team, so the MRO team can find out if the donor has a reasonable, verifiable medical explanation for any confirmed positive drug screen results. So again, here's the solution in a very basic process flow. So again, the oral fluid point of collection test is, so to speak, collected. Then the result is scanned. So it's not read by an individual, it's scanned. And that's very important because I will address some state laws where that scan makes a big difference in regards to how some states view this. So if it is scan negative, you can select a, so to speak, screening package, and then that negative result can be associated with that order. So, you can have a drug screen within that package. The negative result can flow through into that order, and you can see the negative result, once the donor completes his or her process to consent, from a background screening perspective. If it is scanned positive, you know, that specimen is sealed and the chain of custody is that digital chain of custody is done. That goes through the lab and MRO process, and the perfected result is integrated into the order, and then you can select the screening package. And in this case, you can collect a screening package that doesn't include, a variety of potentially costly employment verifications or criminal checks and such, where the data fees can be very high. You can all of a sudden just say, hey, I just want a drug screen only. And that once that result comes back and you see Joe Blow's positive for cocaine, you can begin your adverse action process and not hire Joe. Or if it comes back negative because it failed to confirm at the laboratory due to cross reactivity, or the donor had a nasal surgery the day prior to getting his specimen collected, all of a sudden, you have a negative result, and then you can launch the more costly background screening package. It's really up to you and how you want to run your risk mitigation program. But again, this gives you the ability to know immediately if it's negative or presumptively positive, and your screening packages can vary depending upon what that result is. So again, there are state regulations for point of collection testing. I put oral fluid point of collection testing. This is really consistent whether it's oral fluid, or urine. But there is one state, Vermont. Vermont does not allow oral fluid. Vermont is a urine only state, as well as Vermont, pursuant to its drug-free workplace statutes, doesn't allow point of collection tests. Point of collection tests are prohibited in Nevada. There's some mixed debate within the community whether the e-reader satisfies the obligation under Nevada law. Nevada law basically says you have to be a, so to speak, accredited laboratory to run a point of collection test. When I look at that and both sides of the equation, I basically still say prohibited in Nevada for testing. The next group here is those 6 states, Alabama, Georgia, Maine, New Mexico, North Carolina, Maryland, all only allow point of collection testing to happen in the pre-employment state, that they don't allow a current employee to be tested with using a point of collection device. That the company is aware of the presumptively positive result. So in those 6 states, you can deploy a point of collection testing solution pre-employment. You can't do it for your current employees. Now, there are 3 states, Kansas, Minnesota, and New York, that I referenced, that those states traditionally didn't allow point of collection testing. However, they now, do allow point of collection testing if you as the company aren't reading the test, or a person isn't reading the test. As long as a lab system is, so to speak, managing the test result, Kansas, Minnesota, and New York allow that. So from that perspective, if you're in Minnesota, you can run, our new point of collection testing solution, and it is compliant with the Minnesota, state rule. However, if you try to use a device where it doesn't have an inline electronic lab-supported reader, you're not going to be able to do it. Minnesota says that is not allowed. And then there is one special state, and it is Oregon. And Oregon, to run a point of collection test, you have to, submit an application to Oregon and pay a $50 fee per year. And really, the application is just identifying yourself that I'm XYZ company, and I'm going to run point of collection tests, and then you pay your $50. So it's not some long application. It's really, the last I looked at it, like a half pager, and it's really a conduit. So Oregon knows who is running these type of tests, as well as a place to gather a fee for a company to run those type of tests. So here are some, recommendations on starting or enhancing a point of collection testing program. So the first thing is here's an algorithm. Let's look at panel considerations. Is your current panel supported with a point of collection testing solution? I'm going to talk, in a slide about some of the drugs that appear in legacy standard laboratory configurations that really, there's really no need to test for them now, since those drugs are really no longer, being widely used in the United States or used at all, and the laboratory positive rates are zero. But you have to look at your panel to say, hey, can I do this? If you're an anesthesiology, provider, and you want to test for propofol, well, point of collection testing isn't for you. Propofol isn't part of any of the configurations in any point of collection testing device. So you need to look at your, so to speak, what panel you need, and as a point of collection device, meet your needs. The next thing is really collector consideration. You want to collect it as the company. And if you're going to collect it as the company, what do you want to do? Do you want to do it in oral fluid? Do you want to do it in urine? And then, if once you select that, you do have training requirements to train all your collectors, as well as a result management requirement. Hey, how are we going to use our results? Are we going to use the new solutions where things are digitized and available, or are we going to do something else? Again, there's no one, mousetrap here, but that's really the consideration if you go down the company path. The next path is really, hey, our panel's available in point of collection tests. We want the clinic to do it. And then it's really just, okay, let's set up our, order management, so package management to go in there and say, hey, we want, whenever, eCup Plus is available, we want to run eCup Plus. And then, the selection, algorithm, as well as the, so to speak, authorization form will be amended to notify the clinics what to do. So again, the clinic collection way is exceptionally easy as long as the panel is supported with that, eCup Plus, which is highly configurable across multiple different panels. So two analytes that have been found in standard drug testing panels that are not supported with point of collection testing. Number one is methaqualone. So, many people have watched the movie Wolf of Wall Street. And, methaqualone was one of, that person's drugs of choice, so to speak. A highly addictive sedative. Again, it was synthesized in the 1950s, and it was made illegal. It was made a Schedule I drug due to the abuse potential and medical issues with it in 1983. By 1988, methaqualone really disappeared from the market altogether. And, anecdotally, there has been no lab positive for methaqualone in decades. So, the last time anybody was positive was during the Wolf of Wall Street days, the early 80s. By the late 80s, it was essentially gone. And in fact, Quest Diagnostics, as part of its standard drug testing panels, does not look for methaqualone. They do have methaqualone testing available for additional fees, but I really don't see, a need to, shoulder that extra cost, for an analyte that is generating, no positive results. The second drug not supported is propoxyphene. Again, another drug from the 1950s. It's an opioid, excuse me. And, the company making it voluntarily removed it from the market in 2010 since, propoxyphene was causing cardiac problems. So people that were using it were having, cardiac incidents, dying. So the company just decided to appropriate, or all the manufacturers that were making it just decided to remove it from the market because other opioids didn't cause that. Now, Quest, has kept it on its drug, standard drug screens panels, and so therefore Quest, shows its data every year in regards to the lab positive rate. So I believe next week, Quest is going to be presenting their lab data for 2023 as part of their drug testing index at the National Drug and Alcohol Screening Association event in Hershey, Pennsylvania. from that perspective, we'll be able to see if Quest has noticed any positives into 2024. But if you look at the data, the lab positive rate, for propoxyphene has been 0.00 for several years, with an occasional blip to 0.001. So again, it's just something that is not being used, and therefore, probably has no utility. So if your company is testing for these drugs and you're now looking for point of collection testing solution, you may have to amend your policy to allow you to move forward with an instant testing solution. But I believe it's worth amending your policy because, again, I don't believe there's any inherent value, adding the cost for these two, analytes. So if you're using a current point of collection, testing program, it's a little bit easier algorithm. If you're happy with your program, you see no issues with it, no actions needed. One of the things I learned during my medical training is the worst enemy of good is better. So if you have a program that you're happy with, trying to improve that program many times causes you more heartburn than just leaving it alone and continuing to be happy with it. However, if you're not happy with it, because you're using urine and you don't like urine, we'll consider a change to oral fluid. If you're collecting it yourself, but now that there's a instant testing option at a clinic, well, switch to the clinic, or vice versa. If you're using a clinic and you're like, wow, maybe we can collect that, urine test that we're collecting, through the eCup Plus product, and we can take that in-house and do an oral fluid testing program, we'll move in that direction. And then it's really the panel change. We need to consider a panel change. Do we need to, eliminate THC from our current panel? Should we put THC back in because we're, going to oral fluid point of collection tests where we know the detection window for THC is only, 4 to 6 hours. Therefore, we want to know about it because that means the person is either coming to the job interview high, which doesn't, probably doesn't indicate someone who's going to stay clean and sober at work, or, showing up after lunch high. You certainly want to know about that. And if you're not testing for THC, you'll never know about the THC unless the person admits it or you see evidence, of the person using on site. So from that perspective, Ashley, I'm going to, turn it over to you to do kind of the closeout here. And then just so everybody knows, I won't be taking, questions during this session, but I will be answering those questions, and ideally you'll get them, by the beginning of next week. Ashley, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Simo. And as Dr. Simo said, any questions from the webinar will be addressed by email. Thank you for attending today's webinar. We will be sending out an email tomorrow with your HRCI and SHRM credits. Please don't forget to take our short survey. We are glad you joined us today. Have a wonderful day, everyone.